Like even on my other, like on our plain Jane you use, I always wear it with the collar up. Number one, to keep it from rubbing your neck. Number two, keep the sun off the back of your neck. Not trying to be elder, but better rally thing, turn up your collar, keep that sun on the back of your neck. You stay out there all day long. Holy cow, man, that used to be a real issue, getting that sunburn right there. It'll really scrape the hide off. But I might go out there and I don't want to do it whenever Doug and Angie's back there. And did it look like Doug and Angie are?
Hello, I'm Jacob Chandler, and I'm a Boy Scout. Today is October the 10th, 2015, and I'll be interviewing Mr. Earl Peavy Jr., my uncle. He is a veteran who served in the United States Marine Corps. He is also a federal agent that served in joint service with the United States military during recent operations in Afghanistan. This interview is part of my Eagle Scout service project. The LaSalle Veterans Exhibit and interviews are part of my Eagle Scout service project. The LaSalle Cultural Center of Gina, Louisiana will display my LaSalle Veterans Exhibit. Our mission is to preserve our LaSalle Parish heritage. The veterans of LaSalle Parish often have experiences from the time of service that go untold. Sir, what time or era did you serve in?
Well, I served in the Marine Corps from 91 until 96. And during that era, it was before 9/11, but in the Marine Corps always has different areas of conflict that it responds to, and I got to experience some of that.
Yes, sir. What branch of service were you in? I know you said you were in the military.
Sure, I was in the United States Marine Corps, and as a Marine, I spent that time as an officer, and I served primarily out of the East Coast, out of the 2nd Marine Division, but I got to serve down in the Caribbean and also on the West Coast and in the Far East, in Japan and in Okinawa.
Yes, sir. What was your rank throughout your service?
Whenever I separated from the Marine Corps, I separated as a captain. I got to serve about my last year as a captain as an 03.
Yes, sir. Would you point to the areas on this map where you served as a Marine?
I sure would. All Marine officers do their training out of Quantico, Virginia, which is right here around Washington, D.C. So we do our basic training as an officer, and then our follow-on training right there in Virginia. And then I had one particular specialty as being an artillery officer, and I trained in Oklahoma, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. But throughout a Marine's life, you never stop training. There's always follow-on schools from the West Coast and again down in the Caribbean. But I also served 6 months over here between Japan and Okinawa and did a lot of training out there too.
Yes, sir. Did you have any survival school or anything of that specialty training?
There was always our primary training at Officer Candidate School, and then after that called the Basic School. And then after that, my artillery school. And then it had the basic survival training. Well, I was kind of an average age for a young officer. I was 23 whenever I went into the Marine Corps. I had just graduated from college, from Louisiana State University. And so I believe I was 23 at the time.
Yes, sir. What all, I remember you said that you had some specialty training and also some basic Marine Corps training. What was an average day in training like?
Well, for the early portions before you get to the fleet in the Marine Corps, when you get out into what you consider the real world of the Marine Corps, that's called the Fleet Marine Force, or the fleet. And before that, I probably had 15, 14 months worth of training before you even get to go out and start doing your real job. And so in that, there was a good number of training billets leading up to going to the fleet, but after you get into the fleet, there's always continuous training in those same areas I talked about. You never ever stop training.
Yes, sir. What about whenever you started in the FBI and did stuff in Afghanistan?
I became involved with the FBI here in 2002 as a special agent. Before that, I was a special agent in the Drug Enforcement Administration. And I was able to join the DEA right after my Marine Corps time. As an FBI special agent in 2008, I was very fortunate enough to get to participate in a program in Afghanistan in which we provided a very particular type of work for our military counterparts called sensitive site exploitation. And that was in Afghanistan, obviously over here in the Persian area. And within Afghanistan, I served at a lot of different bases. I started off in what's called Kandahar. That's Kandahar Airfield, and then we went out on missions out into bad guy land from there. From Kandahar, spent a couple weeks there. Then I went to a place called Salerno Forward Operations Base, and we did a lot of missions out of there. And in between that, I spent a couple of weeks at another forward operations base called Sharana. And those were in different strategic locations within Afghanistan. But most of my time in Afghanistan was on the border with Pakistan. That's where we were close to. Yes, sir.
Well, during your Marine Corps service, can you go specifically what all job assignments you had or positions you held?
Sure. In general, as a Marine officer, you hold a lot of different billets. You may have a primary job, but they never let you just do one job. You'll always have a lot of different responsibilities. That's part of your job. One aspect of that is, although we get many plaques throughout our career, and some of them mean more than others, this one will kind of tell you some of the answers on that. This one of the plaques I got whenever I separated from the Marine Corps, and I had been a commanding officer of a battery. It's like a company. And in it, it talks about where I was headquarters battery, commanding officer. Before that, I had been an officer in charge of a Marine Corps security detachment down off the coast of Haiti, saving Haitian and migrant refugees. Before that, I was a battery liaison officer where I worked and lived with the infantry and was the representative for my specialty with the infantry. And before that, I was a forward observer. And so that kind of gives, and I obviously held a lot of other positions too, but that is kind of some of the big ones which I held.
Yes, sir. I noticed you mentioned something about the Haitian refugees. Can you explain to me some of the stuff you did during that time?
Certainly. That was a big time in my career, or in my time in the Marine Corps. I believe it was maybe 1994. There were some political events and some terrible events that happened down in Haiti, in which a lot of people were being persecuted, and those Haitians were trying to flee their country, and by any means necessary. And it was a terrible plight, and there would be many thousands that would go to the water in hopes to try to get to Florida. And the United States wanted the military and the Coast Guard at the time to be able to stop them. I wasn't a part of the Coast Guard, but what the Marine Corps was assigned to do was to provide security detachments on board Coast Guard cutters, as the Coast Guard cutters would go and save these people out of the water by the thousands. And what started off as me as a younger lieutenant volunteering to go, and we got training, some more of this follow-on training. We got training from Marine Corps FAST teams, that's Fleet Anti-Terrorist Security Teams. We also got training from Coast Guard leadette teams, that's kind of like their SWAT teams. We got some training from military police, and what we did was I started off with 16 Marines. Myself and my one staff NCO started in Cologne. We had 16 weeks. We thought we were going to go down there for about 2 or 3 weeks and have a big time doing real world operations, and that turned into, instead of 6 weeks, instead of a couple of weeks with 16 Marines, it grew and grew and grew, as some conflicts do. And we stayed there for over 5 months, and at one point we had over 220 Marines assigned to us. And at one point we had those Marines on over 50 Whitehall, like this ship right here, this Coast Guard cutter. We have many different types of Coast Guard cutters. They're considered Whitehalls because they're white, but also on 50 different white and gray hull, which was U.S. Navy ships that came down to help us try to save all these migrants out of the water. It wasn't just the Haitians. The Haitians started hitting the water there around the summertime of that year, and we probably helped save around 15,000 of them. I say we, I'm talking about the collective we. But I would rotate my Marine security teams on each one of these Coast Guard cutters and the different Navy cutters. After many weeks, after a couple months of that, the country of Cuba decided that it wanted attention in this plight, and it released a lot of people and allowed them to try to escape off of Cuba to try to get to Florida also. So within 1 day, after months of doing Haitians, we all turned around and headed back up to Cuba, right here, and we're even more, tens of thousands of Cuban refugees went to the waters trying to make their way to Florida, and we had to save them out of the water. So where we probably picked up about 15,000 Haitians, we probably picked up about 40,000 Cubans.
Yes, sir.
And so it was quite an operation. We did that for over 5.5 months. So it was that was my primary real world operation that I did in the Marine Corps, being in charge of those 220 Marines as a young lieutenant.
Yes, sir. Wasn't this also during that time that you met your wife?
It sure was. And I don't know if you guys can see this photo, but in this photo right here, it has myself and my wonderful wife. We've been married now for over 20 years. And she was an officer on this particular Coast Guard ship. This is the Gallatin, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Gallatin, number 721. It was a command vessel during the time that I was down there. And she was an engineer officer, and we got to meet, and then about two and a half years later, we wound up getting married. So it was a wonderful story. We not only had a very difficult but very rewarding deployment, saving the Haitians, but I got to meet my wife Nancy.
Yes, sir. How did your military service affect your later occupations?
Well, I have to say that I owe everything to the Marine Corps. In my professional career, working for the federal government, I know that I would not have been able to achieve these positions and be given these opportunities if it wasn't for my foundation from the Marine Corps, where it teaches you about discipline, it teaches you accountability, it teaches you to find the best in you, and it teaches you how to work with your shortcomings too. And all of that has brought about a sense of professionalism that was able to transfer over to my federal service. And I am always grateful to the Marine Corps for everything it gave me. And from the day-to-day amount of information and background to even on a bigger scale, because it is such a close foundation. I have friends that I worked with in the Marine Corps that I'm still in contact with, who are in other branches of law enforcement and government work, and it makes you an even closer bond with them. And I'm sure it's that way with other services too. But for the Marine Corps, it is a very, very special bond, and I do owe everything to them for that.
Yes, sir. Well, during your time in Afghanistan and as part of the FBI, what all experiences did you have in there that you're willing to share with us?
There was many rewarding experiences. It was the highlight of my federal government career, and I include even the DEA with that. And I was in Afghanistan for about 4 months, for about a 4-month deployment. But in that, it was action-filled. I was very lucky enough to be assigned to different special operations forces teams, and then later special forces teams, and going on missions with them, helping to exploit different material that we found on different mission sites.
Yes, sir. Well, I know you've been involved in all kinds of different job positions and stuff over your entire career, but can you describe a typical day during the Marine Corps service?
Sure. In the Marine Corps, we had, at times, we had some regular routine, although nothing's ever really routine. I would say it would kind of depend on if we were out in the field training, or if we were deployed overseas, or if we were back at our home base, back in what we would call a garrison, like not out in the field. And so on a typical day, we normally would wear our camouflage utilities. Now, the military doesn't wear these old style anymore, but this was what we would wear in garrison or in training. Your prototypical camouflage utilities, the top and the bottom. And there would be certain days or weeks in which we would go out to the field and practice our accuracy in our shooting and in our movements and our communication. And sometimes during the day, a lot of times during the night. And then sometimes we would go do the same thing, but we would do it out at sea, because the Marines, you do things off in the ocean. And sometimes the ships would be run by Marines, but most of the time they were run by Navy personnel. And we'd go out on the ocean, and then we would practice assaulting the beach, and big Amtraks and different LCAC, these air-cushioned craft. And then at times we would go deploy overseas on a unit deployment. I made a unit deployment to the Far East, and we started off doing 2 months in Okinawa, an island a couple hundred miles away from Japan. And we trained up in the mountains and the hills of Okinawa, doing call for fire. And then after 2 months, we did 2 months in Japan, and we were assigned to a base that was at the base of Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji is a beautiful place that is very revered by the Japanese culture. And it was amazing getting to be there and train each day. Almost every day there was out in the field, and where we would shoot our artillery pieces and practice our maneuvers. At any given moment, you could look up and see nearly the top of Mount Fuji, over 12,000 feet high. And so that was an incredible experience. And we did some training with the Japanese Defense Forces, the JDFs. And then on, I think it was 4th of July, 1992, maybe, we got to climb to the top of Mount Fuji on 4th of July as a fun unit deal, and we had a lot of fun. It was one of the highlights of my life. I have great photos from getting to climb Mount Fuji. So we went from 4th of July on the top of Mount Fuji to the next year, well, a couple years later, 4th of July, we were saving Haitians in the middle of the Caribbean.
Yes, sir.
So I always have good 4th of Julys with the Marine Corps.
Yes, sir. Well, I know certainly during all your service there's very serious times that you were involved in. But were there any humorous or unusual events that you remember?
Well, there's always a lot, and some of them we may not be able to say on camera, but you're right. With different deployments and different time frames, the best medicine for hard work is always laughter and being lighthearted. And Marines are some of the best at that, because sometimes things do get long and tedious and it gets very difficult work, and it can be stressful. But because of that, we all learn have good ways to make each other laugh and have a lot of fun. And I would say just going out with my friends, whether they be other officers or my staff NCOs, because we were very, very close, tight bonded unit, whether that was going out on the town in Tokyo, which I'd never been to Tokyo, but we went for 2 or 3 days there for fun, to then, you know, a year or two later when we were down in the Caribbean, when we were saving Haitians, my unit, my Marines, we kept the Marines kind of headquartered out of Guantanamo Bay, naval base in Cuba. And so as we would rotate those teams there, I usually stayed out on one of these command vessels, but I would come back for 2 or 3 days at a time. And so we would all meet up with all of our friends and fellow mates and go out and have a big time and get everybody laughing and kind of do a good pressure release before we all went back out.
Yes, sir. Well, I see we have some photos up here.
Yes.
Can you describe to me some of the stuff that's going on at the time of these photos?
I sure will. The primary one in the middle is just a standard photo of myself in my dress blues, wearing a Sam Brown belt with my officer's sword. In the Marine Corps, if you're not a Marine, we're very proud of our officer's swords. They are based off of what's called a Mamluk sword, which goes back to some of the very first missions that the Marine Corps did in Libya. The picture here to the lower left of that is myself and one of my post compadres, Carl Kuga, and we were probably doing some type of training there and had some kind of a you know, get together we went to. We're in our dress whites, our summer dress whites, and the photo on the top is based off of a photo that was taken of me by some of my teammates whenever I was in Afghanistan in 2008, and that's actually on a mission. We had assaulted that area that night before. That was actually in the morning, and we hit 5 of these little mud huts, and we were at a high altitude, about 8,300 feet, and we're on the Pakistani border, and we caught at least 2 bad guys in a cache of weapons, and we did a lot of tactical questioning out there at the time, and then ran some missions with some of our local counterparts for 2 or 3 days and lived up on the mountain. And that local unit that we worked with is represented by the patch, the Kandak Commandos, which they gave me a patch when I left. It meant a lot to me. And then the other patches and coins also represent the FBI side of that Afghanistan deployment. And so then this other photo here in the frame is yet another standard photo of myself. That's actually around my wedding date, and I got married in my salt and peppers, and very proud and happy of that. Then I have a couple of coffee mugs, one of my Marine Corps unit, the one with the flags out of it. The coffee mug to the far left is a DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration mug with my name. The mug on the right is representative of my FBI days in Los Angeles. I spent about 9 years out in Los Angeles. serving as a special agent, and my best years of that was serving on the Los Angeles SWAT team. It's an enhanced SWAT team for the FBI. It's very operational. They do operations every week, and it's very rewarding. Very hard work, but very, very rewarding. So I love that coffee mug. And then in the middle, that is a timed fuse for an artillery round. Obviously, it's inert now, but I love that as a little memento of my day in the Marine Corps.
Yes, sir. Well, after your service ended, what did you do? Did you go to work?
Yes, after my service ended, I was fortunate enough to be married to my lovely wife, and I worked for a number of months with my father, who's a former naval officer, and I worked with him for a number of months until I got picked up as a special agent working for the Drug Enforcement Administration. And when I became a DEA agent, then I took the first office to Los Angeles. I worked for the DEA for about 4 years as a special agent, and then we had the terrible tragedy of 9/11, and so I did a lateral move over into the FBI and stayed in Los Angeles at the time as a special agent.
Yes, sir. Well, during your service, did you make any close friendships?
I certainly have made many close friendships. Just like the Marine Corps, DEA, and FBI, it is rewarding work, but it's very difficult work. It's very stressful, and but the rewarding part of that is the people that you work with, and some of the very best people that you'll ever work with are in those agencies, just like the Marine Corps. So those friendships have carried through to this day. I still call friends of mine from the Marine Corps, talk with them almost every other week, and I still call and email my friends in the DEA, although they're all over the world. And obviously my FBI friends, I work with a number of
Since then, have you been involved in any veterans organizations?
As far as direct veterans organizations, I have not, although I'm in close contact with them and keep up on the current events on some of the more pressing issues as far as trying to find good medical help and continuing assistance for our veterans, and whether that's through the VA or whether that's through the Wounded Warrior program, and then even just smaller, more local programs, whether it's in our state here in Louisiana or in our different regions like the Architects region.
Yes, sir. Well, are there any other experiences you'd like to share with us today?
Well, I have to say that we've had some good ones over the years, and probably the most rewarding experience is getting to meet my wife and getting to serve with so many different organizations, from Marine Corps, but also Coast Guard. Did a lot of training with Army and with Air Force, with Navy. With DEA, we obviously worked with a lot of different entities. I was lucky enough to be on the Los Angeles DEA Mobile Enforcement Team as a tactical team. We did a lot of sensitive missions in which we would go and be deployed, but we were a traveling tactical team in which we made a lot of arrests. I got to go to a lot of different good training schools. We made a lot of operations, and some of the best experiences, which helped me very much when I laterally transferred into the FBI. So within the FBI, I've had a lot of good cases. I've worked a lot of criminal investigations, but the last 8 or 9 years I've worked nothing but counterintelligence, national security. But out of all those, my most rewarding experience with the FBI is tactical work, either working with the SWAT team in Los Angeles, or which culminated in going overseas to Afghanistan.